Hi, and welcome to the Art of Film Funding. I'm your co-host, Claire Papin, along with writer-producer Carol Dean, author of the best-selling book, The Art of Film Funding, and host of this show. Carol is the president of From the Heart Productions, a nonprofit organization that has supported filmmakers with the Roy W. Dean Grant, fiscal sponsorship, education, and resources for over 30 years. Carol also teaches the Learn Producing class. Each class features an industry expert guest instructor and is designed to give the information, guidance, and support to become a successful producer. You can learn more about this class and all of From the Heart Productions offerings at FromTheHeartProductions.com. 2, 1. Today we are joined by our guest host, filmmaker Heather Lenz, best known for directing and producing the Sundance documentary Kusama Infinity. Our special guests today are Elliot Kirschner and Heather Kinlaw Lofthouse. Elliot is a New York Times bestselling author and an Emmy award-winning news and documentary producer. He's the executive producer of the nonprofit Science Communication Lab, which produces and distributes science films for public and educational audiences. Heather is the executive director of Inequality Media and Inequality Media Civic Action, and the founder of Coffee Klotch Productions. She's also the co-host of The Coffee Klotch, a conversational podcast about the news of the week, with her longtime collaborator, Robert Reich. Today, we'll discuss The Last Class, a documentary feature produced by Heather and directed by Elliot about former Secretary of Labor, Robert Reich.
Well, thank you so much, Claire, for the introduction, and thank you so much, Elliot and Heather, for joining us today. Elliot, for anyone who hasn't seen The Last Class yet and may be unfamiliar with the subject, can you please tell us what it's about?
Well, it's as the name suggests, it is the last class, and we're speaking specifically of the last class of Professor Robert Reich, who many maybe better know him as the former Secretary of Labor in the Clinton administration, and also an internet sensation and a public intellectual and all of that. But he would say that his true calling, and he does in the film, is that of a teacher. He taught in institutions of higher education for over a 42-year span, and we were there to capture his final semester, teaching a course called Wealth and Inequality at UC Berkeley. It was a huge course. It has about 800 students in it, in the largest lecture hall on campus. And it was just really an opportunity to sort of look at, have him explain what it's like to wrap up this chapter of his life against a backdrop, obviously, of a very complicated society. And a moment in history that these children are entering in, specifically around the issues that are raised in the class, which are about our economic system and democracy more generally. So it really is an examination of that semester, following from the beginning of the semester through the end, and then his recollections, looking back at his life and specifically teaching, but also teaching that course and what that means.
Well, it's a really great film, and I definitely encourage our listeners to check it out if they haven't seen it already. Heather, how did you become acquainted with Robert Reich, and what made you think that he'd be a good subject for a documentary?
Thanks so much, Heather. It's so exciting to be here, and thank you, Claire. So I became acquainted with Professor Reich at the time because he was my teacher in grad school. So I took a leadership class with him in 2006. Here I am aging myself. And the class was exceptional. Some of my classmates at the Goldman School at UC Berkeley, this was a master's in public policy program, were a little frustrated, I think, with the class because it followed a lot of case studies, it had a lot of reading, and it wasn't what I would say would be more of a business school class that says, okay, you're running a company or an organization with 10 to 15 people. This is how you lead it. These are HR issues. It was way more philosophical and way more Socratic, or he is in his delivery, which I loved. And so he was my professor. And I wasn't one of his teaching assistants, which are called graduate student instructors, but so many students of the Goldman School are. And so I just knew him from that. And then our paths crossed again a couple times. I returned to UC Berkeley as a staffer for a while, and he and I interacted and had to do a lot of stuff together where I was taking him around to different UC campuses, all 10, in fact. He and I would drive to Merced. And so we reconnected. And your second part of your questions, what made me think he would be a good subject for a film? He's a good subject for everything. I mean, he is so thoughtful, and the way he processes things is so candid and authentic and transparent. I think that aligns with his Socratic method in the classroom. I think he's really a thinker. And so capturing him on film to me is a no-brainer. So what we do for the bulk of what I've done with him is make these short form video explainers to put out on social media. So make a longer something with him, a short film, a documentary. Yes, please. I mean, I think he lends himself to it. He makes it easy. And he'd probably be annoyed that I said that because, he'd say, oh, please. But I'm telling you, it's easy.
No, I absolutely agree with you. Elliot, the film
Mhm.
highlights Robert's work to get his students to think critically, and he
Mhm.
also says he wants them to see examples of people who disagree but still get along. Can you please
Yes.
talk about why those issues are so important, especially now?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think most people listening, I mean, have some sense of this, that, we are at a crisis in this country and the world more generally about how we process information, I think, how we think about difficult problems, how we listen to others, how we debate, how we form ideas that might help us get through these very troubling times. Some of those troubles are self-inflicted, some are more, broad, they're sort of, climate change, or, the legacies of racial injustice and economic injustice. But, if I think that, as Heather talked about the sort of Socratic method, and the way that Bob likes to think, he really is interested in what other people think. He really is someone that likes to listen more than talk. And, for someone who has a lot to say, to really want to hear what others have to say is, I think, a really important modeling for young people. And in his class, he's very, even though online, he gives a lot of his opinions, he's very careful not to give his opinions in the class. He really wants to present data, which is, doesn't have an opinion, but he makes very clear that people of good faith can come to different conclusions from the same data. And I think that's what he thinks critical thinking is all about. And it's essential for learning, it's essential for democracy, and the intersection of the two. So I really wanted to, it resonates with what I view education should be, that it's a participatory event and an exercise that we need to be engaged in and take responsibility for our learning, and from seeking out other people's opinions. And so, being able to showcase him explain that with all of the eloquence that he does, it was just an honor, because I think it's a message that these times desperately need.
Well, you did a great job explaining that, and that's absolutely true. The
Thank
film,
you.
but yeah, what's included in the film is definitely very different content than I've seen online in other places. So, one of the topics that Robert Reich hopes educate people about is income equality. Heather, can you please help us understand how drastic income equality has become in America and what has caused the gap to widen so much in past decades?
Yes, so Inequality Media is the name of our nonprofit, and Bob has been talking about income inequality and wealth inequality for, I don't know, 40 plus years. He's not the only one, right? People like Bernie Sanders and other people, Elizabeth Warren, have been really emphasizing that there is a problem when the federal minimum wage, do we know when it was last raised? Was it in 2010? Was it in 2020? It was 2009, the last time the federal minimum wage was raised. So what has happened over time is that the productivity gains, people working so hard, are being siphoned off from the average worker and going to the top. So CEO pay has exploded. There has been corporate malfeasance. There is money in politics where all these corporations are lobbying in DC and getting tax breaks. Billionaires and multimillionaires are getting tax breaks. So the system has been tilted towards the rich and tilted away from working people. And there are many examples of that. And I think what's so important that Bob likes to emphasize is this idea that there's a free market where it's just a market out there in nature, and that, it just is what it is, and there's supply and demand, and it just meets in the middle where it's supposed to, is not actually the case. The case is that the government is here to set up the rules, to set up the boundaries, to set up the scaffolding around how this system works. And we have the ability to set it up in different ways, emphasize different policies, and we vote to have electeds who represent what we think should be done to the population, right? To the populace, to most people. And so a lot of the policies that have been set up are not helping working people and the poor. And so this gap has gotten more and more drastic between what certain people are earning, right? And what certain people, and how wealth is being exacerbated, right? Wealth begets wealth. And so the wealthier are getting wealthier. We're about to have our first trillionaire. And so it's really, if we don't right the trends that are happening, if we don't pay attention to the causes and where we have levers to adjust these issues, it's going to get worse. And I'll add one other thing. What Bob has said so eloquently is, in these conditions, when you have people who can't pay the bills, I mean, think about it. SNAP benefits are about to be on the cutting block because, our government is shut down and our Congress can't agree on things. So that is a problem. And when people are facing these dire circumstances and see other people getting richer, they're unsettled, they're frustrated, they're angry. And that allows for someone to come in, they're vulnerable, and come in and, be a tyrant and convince them that they will be represented. And so that is a very quick and dirty version of what has happened with income inequality and why it's a problem.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And speaking of trillionaires, I'm sure we've all seen in the news that Musk is asking for $1 trillion bonus pay. It's just really mind-boggling. I think somewhere in your on your website it says something like that. In the old days, CEOs made 4 to 6 times what their employees did, or something like that, and now it's just like really radically different. But
yeah, so I can give you a stat, Heather. So CEOs in 2024, they were paid 281 times as much as a typical worker. And in contrast, in 1965, which wasn't actually that long ago, I was born in 77, they were paid 21 times as much as the typical worker. And so the question is that CEO that much more productive than the typical worker? I think the answer is no, personally. But so the CEO compensation going up, 1,000% increase compared to a 26% increase for a typical worker's compensation, that is distorted and that is problematic.
well, thank you. I'm glad you gave the correct statistic there. And Heather, I did just want to ask one follow-up question. Obviously, I know you can never squeeze everything into one movie, but I noticed the film didn't address gender and equal pay for equal work. And I just wondered if equitable pay for women is a topic that came up in the class, but for one reason or another didn't end up in the film.
That's such an important question. Also, I'm biased, obviously. But yes, so it definitely comes up at the class. The class is called Wealth and Poverty. And again, this is this large undergraduate course that Bob taught for 20 years almost at UC Berkeley. And it had 750 people in it. And what's so great is you get to see this course in this film, but it doesn't focus on the course as such. It focuses on the teacher. It focuses on the thoughts Professor Reich is having about where his students are and where he is in his life at this critical juncture for the country, for himself. And so the good news is the course is actually offered online for free. If you look on YouTube, Robert Reich, Wealth and Poverty, there is a 14 course class that is under YouTube courses, and everyone can take it. And there is definitely a part about equal pay related to gender and related to sex. And so, yes, that is there. And there's been some other films that focused more on the course. One was called Inequality for All. And so, yeah, definitely the course does address it. And this film, which by the way is only 71 minutes, right? Yeah, it didn't hit on it as such in the film.
Well, thank you for explaining that. And Elliot, how did you begin the process of making the film?
Yeah, so Robert Reich likes to call this, when we do some talkbacks now about the film, a great bait and switch. But the reality was, I come from a news background, and I just wanted to document a point in time that I thought if we didn't document would be lost. And that was just this final semester. So going in, we had no idea what this film would be. In fact, our best guess, our most ambitious guess would be a short documentary, a short film. And we shot it as such, but we didn't even know if we would even sustain that. We just thought, well, maybe it's, he has this huge online presence with video. So if nothing else, we could put it into that system. And so we filmed it. We didn't really film that much. We filmed a little bit, in terms of if we'd gone in, thinking this could be a feature-length documentary, I think we would have filmed it differently. And I asked myself, what must that have done to the film itself? But we went in and we sort of just started documenting it to see what we got. And when we laid out, a rough assembly of the first edit, and we sort of had, a little over an hour's worth of material, or hour, 20 minutes, whatever it was, with the expectations that we would cut it down to 20, 25 minutes. And we watched it through, we really felt, wow, there's something that's special here. It seems to want to live in a bigger shell than a sort of, what we initially envisioned. And so that was, but at the same time, it didn't feel like a 90-minute film, and we worried it was going to be too short. It was going to fall in this weird, in between level of being too long for a short and too short for a feature length. And so, but it really started with just the idea of let's not think about the final product. Let's just document this remarkable man going through this period of time and just see what we have. And I, working with Heather and having, Bob's own online distribution, where it allowed us to sort of have the confidence that, if we filmed something, it would probably find an audience in some form. And we didn't have to overly concern ourselves with what a specific investor wanted or a distributor. We just went in to not even, I say to make a film, but even that is a little more prospective than it really was, just to film this period of his life.
Well, I think the length works really well, and I think these days people do have shorter attention spans, so a shorter feature is, a good thing.
Yeah.
Heather, I'm wondering, was this film shot exclusively during the one semester? Because obviously it sounds like you went in and just started filming and you weren't exactly sure what the length would be or things like that. So after you decided it was going to be a longer film, did you go back and, film some other things?
We didn't. It was just the one semester, and that was Elliot's beautiful vision from the start. He said, and I have text messages to prove it, why don't we shoot at the beginning and then we shoot at the end? And so what we ended up doing was we did his first day, and we ended up doing something in the middle, and then we ended up doing the eve before his final class, where we have this great scene of him in a classroom where no one's behind him, this large auditorium at UC Berkeley called Wheeler. And so he's in there before his final class, which then you can see teeming with people who are in the aisles and, squished into all their seats with all their smiles and open eyes and laptops and all of it. So it was indeed one semester, and it was his final semester teaching that class.
Yeah, it's very touching, the footage you got at the end. So, Elliot, what was the most surprising thing that happened during the making of the documentary for you personally?
You know, it's a great question, and I guess what's been most surprising, and I don't want to dodge it, but I think what's been most surprising is the distribution. Is that is that sort of am I not answering the question, or is that okay to say that? Um, I mean, making the film, it was, I guess, surprising about making the film. I mean, I knew he was a special person. I knew he was very thoughtful and smart and all that. And I think you mentioned, that it's a portrayal of him, or it's a version of him that you don't really see in a lot of his public pronouncements. I think it's vulnerable, it's introspective. I mean, it's emotional. He does have that as well, but I think that to the level that he shared with us at it going through that semester is a little different. So I guess for the filming part of it, just the level of I would say courage he had to be so open with his emotions as he processed what was a very complicated period of his life, and to allow us to share that and to trust us. I mean, he has no editorial role in the making of this film. He didn't see the film until 2 weeks before it premiered at DC Docs, and so to just to let cameras follow him and not know what it was going to be, and just show up for these interviews and be present and answer the questions and be candid about how he was feeling, I think was, I mean, I hope, you always hope that as a storyteller that somebody would do that, but the level that he did that was, I guess, was surprising to me. I mean, what's been very, very surprising also is just how this film has been received and the theatrical distribution and that whole run. And I think it's we're yeah, we've that's been in many ways just as big a surprise, considering the state of the film business and the movie business and in general. And it's been, I think, for all of us associated with the film, a real source of hope, that maybe that there still are people that want to go into a theater and watch a film together and experience it and talk about it. So that's also been a wonderful surprise.
Well, yeah, that's a great thing. I'm glad you've had that experience. That's terrific. Heather, in addition to Robert's concerns about income equality, he's also dealing with his own mortality in the film. And I wonder what lessons you hope the audience will take from that.
Yeah, so, well, I hope people see it and they take, different things. I hope they see themselves and question, where they are and feel buoyed by it and feel comforted that someone else who we know as, this rock star thinker and this incredibly prolific writer and someone who can draw cartoons and he's funny, but he too grapples with what so many of us grapple with age, right? And this disconnect between what he says is the man he sees in the pictures versus from back in the day versus the man he sees in the mirror. And so again, this candor that he expresses in life, which Elliot and I have seen working with him, and I've seen working with him for years, we tried to get more of that on camera. Now, some people have said it doesn't feel that personal. We didn't see baby pictures of him, for example. So it's not a biopic, right? It's not, let's travel through time and look at this man's life. It's more, it's an intimate film with where he is today. And how strange it is to get old, and to watch yourself get old, and to feel yourself going through chapters, and the cognitive dissonance that one feels, when you go to a college reunion or graduate, a retirement party, these kinds of things. So I think different viewers will take it, obviously, in different ways and play with it in their own minds and hearts, how they want to. But I think it's very special for this person to be so honest with how he's grappling with things. And he gets emotional in the film, but not too emotional. And being able to hear that and what he's going through, I think, is just helpful and elucidating.
Well, thank you. Elliot, I guess, we've already touched on the reasons for this, including the
Mm,
fact that, initially you weren't really planning to make a feature and it's not a biographical film. But as a viewer, when I watched it, I was aware there wasn't a ton about his personal life. I mean, I'm talking about
mm,
things like, does he have kids and is he married and, those
mhm.
kinds of things. And I was just wondering if that was off limits or if you just, you were just, really focused on other aspects of his life.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, that's a good question. It's one that comes up, with some frequency. I really wanted to not tell the story of this person per se as just sort of a, I mean, I wanted it to be focused. I really wanted it, and I think because it started off as a short film, that, how much other space would we get into? We don't follow along students in the class either, or, things that we might expect if we had um, done this as from a feature length from the beginning. But I guess I think we have so much of the personal in this world that it feels like that's what is the intimate element, is if you can get behind the scenes and understand who they are by who their family is. And I really wanted to just take a different tact. I wanted to live in a different world with this film. I wanted it to be about his ongoing, sort of his own love for teaching and what that means. And I felt like the more the other elements that sort of round out the Wikipedia page, I mean, you can, anybody who's curious can go search him up and find out all sorts of stuff about him. And I guess I was just less interested in that. And it was a choice, I mean, I think other people would have made a different choice, and I can't say it was the right choice, but for me it was that I really wanted it to be about, I wanted to see this story through a rather narrow lens and then to fill that picture as best I could. And I really wanted it to be about this semester, his, if I think if his personal life had really been impacted in this by this semester or really came up organically, then we would have touched upon that. Just like when he's packing up his office, he's referencing his past experiences, that was organic to the world that we were living in. And the confines I think that I wanted to set out from the beginning was really just to document this semester and what was coming up in it naturally. And it didn't come up naturally, those elements didn't come up naturally, and I didn't want to force them in just to sort of fill out what would be sort of more of a biographical sketch.
Yeah, well, that all makes sense, and obviously it's a very strong film, so it works. And Heather, could you talk a little bit about how long your team spent editing the film?
Of course. So we finished the film at the end of the semester and we played around with it for a while trying to figure out what we had, right? We still didn't know at the beginning of the editing process that it would for sure be a short film or something longer. So we played around with it for a while, and then our terrific editor, Josh Melrod, really took, I don't know, Elliot, what, 7 months? I mean, he was remarkable to work with, and he and Elliot worked so beautifully together. And he really helped us see this is what, if we're doing, he and Elliot spent a long time figuring out if it could work as a feature length documentary. And so Josh was phenomenal. And he, I think, was incredibly efficient. I think he connected with Elliot, saw what we had, and they came up with a vision, and it was pretty rapid as far as these things go. We didn't have hundreds of hours of footage, we had 40 hours or something of footage, and so much was in the same room. And so I think his skill and his talent and his interest in consuming what we had done was so palpable and so incredible to work with. So he and Elliot, I'm speaking for you here, Elliot, they just melded together and it was done rather quickly as these things go.
Yeah, I would add that we knew going in we were going to roughly follow the arc of the semester, so it does, and so it was really about trying to get a overall feel for the film, the interstitial elements, the musical choice of jazz, which we both, thought was ideal, and Josh did a wonderful job picking these tracks. And originally they were temp tracks. They're very famous jazz musicians that sort of populate it, and we were gonna go in and try to get a composer to sort of fill it out, especially when it was originally under the budget for a short film. But when we went to it becoming a feature, and we knew that the musical elements and that the overall tone was going to be so essential, we went to Heather, and we hired a music supervisor, Heather Guibert, who did a wonderful job in helping us license that footage. Sorry, that the license the music. And I, so it was the overall arc of the film was pretty much set in that it was sequential. It was, it was a linear sort of walk through the semester, but it was really trying to get the most out of each of these elements, the interviews, the moments in the classroom. I mean, there's a lot of footage of that, like, what would pop, what would help make the case, not just for what he was teaching, because as Heather said, there have been other films about what he teaches, and he's, and the whole course is available online, but really trying to find these moments in the lectures that amplified the overall themes that were coming through the other elements of the film, and then weaving that together and really trying to find the tone and the pacing to have it hit.
Yeah, well, you did a great job. And I'm wondering, Elliot, if you could talk a little bit about how you financed the film, especially since you initially intended for it to be a short, which would, typically have a smaller budget, and then it turned into feature, which would typically have a longer budget. I mean,
Yeah,
not
well,
longer, but a bigger budget,
right,
sorry.
bigger, yeah, no, for sure. Really, Heather's nonprofit funded this film, and it was, we went there because it was really going to be about so it was going to be, originally just documenting him, and so let's just film him, so let's just get that, and that seems like something, regardless of what we were going to do with it, was in the mission of the nonprofit Inequality Media Civic Action, which funded this. And Heather can talk more about how that's all set up and that organization. But it was a budget for a short film that and the filming part of it was rather modest, as we explained. It didn't require a lot of travel. We're local. It was in Berkeley. All of it was shot within a mile or two of each other. When you factor in the Saul's Diner and where there's a scene there, and the classroom, and the homes, and all in the offices, but it was really in a very small geographic area, and there were these condensed shoots. So it was rather modest in terms of the filming part of it, although we had multiple cameras and wonderful cinematographers. But it was, and so we went through that, and then we had to, as we explained, extend the editing and extend the film and the music licensing, and then all of the post and all of that. But the funding did come, and was very fortunate about that, in sort of these different waves from the nonprofit.
Well, that's great, because that can be such a challenge. Heather, is there anything that you wanted to add about the nonprofit?
Just to say that, it was so in line with our mission to talk about the urgency of education, and to basically, one of our approaches, we describe it as a nesting dolls approach. So we say a lot of the same things in different formats and different shapes. And I think to make a film that tests distribution, right? And how are we going to get people together to be focusing on these issues, and the success we've had with getting people into theaters and meeting up in the lobby afterwards and discussing local issues, and this emphasis that Bob makes in the film, and that the film makes in and of itself, basically, about the power of public education in a democracy, and for our population, and for the sake of upward mobility, is incredibly important. And so it just made sense for the nonprofit to fund it, especially when it was a short. But again, as Elliot said, we did it in a pretty cost-effective way. The music was more expensive than we thought, but I didn't really, Yeah, we're very fortunate to have been able to fund it, and it wasn't all that expensive when all was said and done.
Well, that's great. And yeah, it's very smart to make a film close to home and, keep the budget low. And Heather, could you tell us what was the biggest obstacle you had to overcome to make the film?
So I mean, this sounds so, again, fortunate and privileged. There weren't huge obstacles. I think because I had such a sense of trust in Elliot and his vision, and such a sense of um, understanding of how Robert Reich is on camera and in the world, that there wasn't like, oof, this is risky, or, I wouldn't say there were big obstacles. I think there was a challenge in trying to make something worthy of the moment. I think there were challenges in trying to figure out what distribution would look like. We got rejected from all but one film festival. So DC Docs was remarkable to us, and we had a terrific premiere there. But so that I'd say was frustrating. But Abrama Rama, who is our phenomenal distributor and collaborative partner on so much, really believed in us and said, who cares about the festivals? Which I didn't really believe them when they said that. I was thinking, oh, you say that to all the neophyte filmmakers, I'm sure, who get rejected from everything. But so there weren't obstacles as such. There were dips and there were, stressful moments, but I really felt that this project from the beginning, again, thanks so much to Elliot, was so clear. It was like, we're going to tell the story of this person whose story deserves to be heard in this new way. And let's make it happen. And we were able to overcome the blips and the bumps and all that.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing this. I'm sure other filmmakers will appreciate you being candid about, not getting into all the film festivals initially thought you might be in. So that's always helpful information, especially because the film is getting out there. And on that note, Elliot, can you please talk about your journey getting the film out into the world, starting with the premiere?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I want to be very, I've worked in a lot of different forms, and I want to be very obvious, candid that obviously making a film about someone like Robert Reich with his reach gives incredible advantages. So no matter what the film ended up being, we knew that he could share it on his social media and millions of people would at least hear about it. So I want to be, honest about having worked on films for which or projects for which that wasn't the case. There's so many wonderful films that are made that don't come with that built-in advantage. That being said, and I don't know why maybe it was because of that too, or it was seen as a celebrity vehicle, whatever. As Heather said, we got rejected from everywhere, except for DC Docs. I mean, being a native San Franciscan and having this be in Berkeley, not having in the San Francisco Film Festival. I mean, it wasn't just, Tribeca and Sundance and South by and Telluride. It was a lot of other ones as well. And so, but I really, I believed that there was a message. I've worked in other mediums where that's been the case and where it's sort of like things that, I just felt like people were missing something, that Bob is beloved. And I felt that, this film, which I think has a hopeful streak to it. It's not Pollyannish, but it's hopeful about the future, that this could really resonate. So as Heather said, we got into DC Docs and we played that opening day, and that was wonderful. It was sort of, wonderful to be in DC, where Bob had served as Secretary of Labor and such. And then we got a wonderful 1 week run at the Quad Cinema in the Village in New York City, and it's a relatively small theaters, but we packed them. We packed them, and they really had an incredible week. And I forget the exact week, forget number, but that week stretched into 8 weeks or something of renewals at the Quad. We went into Berkeley. We even had a sort of, it's Kai Boyd, who owns the last movie theater in Berkeley, will tell you. He had to sort of be convinced about the film, even though it was Robert Reich and even though it was Berkeley. And it's just been an incredible success there. It's just, done incredible box office numbers there. And And then from there, it's just we really wanted to, I'm a big believer, and the other members of the film team are big believers that the best place to see a film is in a movie theater. And we really wanted to use this film to try to test whether people could come to theaters. And we've just played, I don't know what the latest statistics are. I think it's 45 states, like 90% of theaters that we've gone into have extended their runs. We've played red states and blue states. We've played rural areas and urban areas.
Over
And it's just,
300 theaters.
yeah.
Over
And
300.
it's just been really, it's just exceptional. And we're still booking theaters now well into January of next year. So we really want to let that run go as much as we can. And now we're moving into non-theatrical, which we're going to run ourselves. We're going to, and we're already getting a lot of people that want to play this at their universities, libraries, for their social groups, religious institutions, things like that. And so hopefully that will be a robust run as well. And we'll eventually go to, video on demand. We're going to have a sales agent, see whether the streaming service platforms. But I do think that this film shows that people will go to theaters and will watch something, and that there is a real hunger for people to gather in community, in person, to have shared experiences. A lot of people want to have discussions. So we've done discussion groups after the film. The fact that it's 71 minutes means that you can have you play the film and have a talk back that doesn't stretch to 2.5 hours. So we've done some of that. There's been a lot of informal people meeting in the lobby, as Heather said, talking afterwards. And so we made a decision with Abramarama. They were really enthusiastic about this early on, to try to prioritize in-person viewing, with the understanding that not everybody can do that. There's a lot of places that don't have theaters. There are people that, for various reasons of health or otherwise, can't make it to a theater. So we are determined we will get it out there in ways that people can watch it, digitally or at home. But we really, we've been very lucky, and part of our hope all along was that we would use the built-in advantages, I said, of this film and Robert Reich's stature and presence to at least challenge some of the assumptions around the movie business, that documentaries are are hard to get people to see, that people don't want to go to theaters, and hopefully we can share this experience and show that, look, it's you don't have to go into all the into the festivals, and there is a real hunger, and again, very cognizant of the advantages we have, but also want to try to see what we can learn that could be extended to other filmmakers, and try to reassess or challenge some of the conventional wisdoms.
Well, Elliot, I really appreciate you sharing all of this with our audience, who, of course, is mostly filmmakers, because, it just shows how you can just roll your sleeves up and get the film out into the world yourself, even if it didn't get into a major film festival or things like that. So it's super informative. And Heather, could you please talk a little bit about what it has been like to share the film with audiences and hear their reaction and so forth?
Yeah, I thought of one other. When you asked me about obstacles, one thing was Bob didn't see the film until 2 weeks before it premiered. We couldn't get him. He was like, I mean, it's about me, and do I want, I don't know. It was hard to get him to see the film, but then he saw it and he was, just the student faces. He couldn't get over how we captured the student faces, and that's what he kept saying. So that was one other obstacle I should have thought of. What has it been like to share it with audiences? I mean, exceptional. 50,000 people, more than that, have seen this film. And I think the reception has been so heartening, including at a time that's so hard for filmmaking, that's so hard for democracy, that's so hard for so many people. And so it's exceeded our expectations. In terms of just the numbers that Elliot referenced, in terms of the qualitative feedback we're getting, the comments on our Substack. We have a Substack for the film, which has been a terrific way to interact with our viewers, people who have gone, people who haven't gone, who people have heard about it, people who have questions after seeing it. What happened to the cabinet chair is a common one. And you all have to see the film to know what that means. But yeah, so we have this, we have a website, thelastclassfilm.com, which a lot of people do. I mean, filmmakers do. But our first ask on the website is sign up to experience Professor Reich's final course. So it's really get involved with us around the film. It's not just here's the where they're it's actually harder to see where to see the film than it is to sign up to join us. And we designed that on purpose. And so audiences feel more connected after seeing it, more hopeful. Many people are seeing it more than once. We had someone say, I drove 10 hours to see the film with my family, but that's what happens when your love language is economics. So it's been incredible. And this community screening phase where people are signing up and they're saying, I want to show it in my local hotel. I want to show it at a theater down the street. I want to show it, at a university. It's been a remarkable influx of interest. And so it's all been incredibly positive, and it feels very gratifying to make something that people want to see and that people want others to see. So we feel grateful for that.
Well, yeah, it's just great. And Elliot, if there's anything you want to share about your experience, it's always exciting if you've made a film and you get to watch it with the audience. If you have anything
Uh,
to add, and also if you could talk about where audiences can currently see the film and how they can get that information.
yeah, I mean, look, it's just there's nothing better than to watch your film with an audience. I mean, that's what it's made for, is to be seen. And having other people see it and knowing that they're experiencing in ways that you could never predict, or that you would never, that would be different from you, is really what I think, the art form is all about. So that's all been very wonderful. I mean, I would say that, we're still trying to find ways to book it into theaters. As Heather mentioned, thelastclassfilm.com, our website, there's listings of where it's currently playing, where we'll be playing in the future. There's also a way to sign up, to our newsletter, so you can know when we go through our different windowing, when we eventually get to video on demand. There's a way to sign up to host a screening, either trying to bring it to your local theater, or to do a non-theatrical type of screening, like at a, as I said, a university or places like that. All that is very available on the website. Um, but I would say, I think that, this idea, and this is something that really was from the start, that we really looked at our premiere as not the end of the process of the making of the film, but really a midpoint. And the same people that have made the film, we mentioned Josh Melrod, who's the editor and a producer on the film. I mean, he's still involved in answering people's emails, as they write in about wanting to screen it. I mean, Meredith DeSalazar, another producer on the film, she's very involved in the non-theatrical. And Ellie is who is a producer or associate producer on the film, is very designed the website and all of this. And so I think that we're really seeing that the film team is really part of the distribution, and that there isn't this sort of one phase and another phase. It was really from the beginning all the way through till now and into the future. And rather than trying to stick to a plan, and no matter what happens, we're constantly iterating, just like making the film, where you're in an edit and you see something, it's not quite working, and you try something else and you rearrange. That same spirit of filmmaking we are taking to the distribution. And I think that there was a sense for a long time that, you try to make this film as best as you can, and then you sort of got it to some place that you could hand it over. And there's still, for some rare films that works. And, I think that's still a model, but it's certainly not the only model. And I think increasingly is a very infrequent model, that really, to be a filmmaker these days, is to also really be thinking about how you could build engagement, how you could build audience, how you can get people to sign up to hear more about it. And that, hopefully the film team that makes the film could be just as committed into putting it out into the world.
Well, I think this is such an important message for our indie filmmakers that, yeah, it's like a good probably year or so at least promoting your film these days, oftentimes to get it out there. So I think I was going to ask about the streaming deal, Heather, but I think we've covered that. There's no streaming deal yet. Is that
No, I
correct?
liked that you were saying the streaming deal as though there
Yes.
were one.
Oh, yeah. Well,
No,
I'm
and
sure
if
there will be.
but if Jeff Bezos comes knocking, I mean, I'm kind of putting this out there in the universe. I don't know if we'll be able to say yes, just because of the whole wealth and income inequality thing. So we'll have to see what streamers are interested.
Yeah, certainly politics play a role in these things these days, don't they? So, well, moving on, Elliot, what
Mhm.
advice would you give to first-time filmmakers?
I would say that um, the world is changing so fast that listen to what other people have to say and be open to a lot of advice, but really believe in yourself. And that thinking about the distribution and the what kind of built-in audience you might have to the film and build that through the production process. Think about, okay, like, wow, these people are really excited about them making a film. Keep them updated. Build your own distribution in mind. And I think that I'm a big believer that sort of direct to audience distribution. We see this with Substack, with newsletters. Where people are publishing themselves and finding an audience, and there's a marketplace. I think this is increasingly going to be the future, and it's scary, and it creates a lot of uncertainty, but it also, I think, creates a lot of opportunity. That by the traditional metrics, this film would have gone nowhere, and now it's going almost everywhere. And again, I want to be very cognizant of the advantages that we have with Bob in the film and all of that. But I also do think that it speaks to a larger movement that there are all sorts of gatekeepers. We have a consolidation in the media universe that's very concerning, but there also is all sorts of new technology that allows for you to reach people directly and market directly and find your niche. And I would just say, believe in that. Think about that as the job of filmmaking as well, is to build an engagement around the film, and to really start with that in mind from the very beginning. It's not wait to you've gone through the sound mix and the color correct and you're sort of wrapping it up and go, okay, what do we do now? It's just oftentimes in making the film, you're going to be coming across people that are interested in it, cultivating those people, letting them know, giving them a sense of buy-in. Even it could be people that are funding the film, it could be people that are in the film, but really start creating a community that could sort of embrace the film once it's made, cultivate that, and just be very open to new ideas and trust yourself. I mean, that's sort of the world we're living in. And I think it's, again, I said there's a lot of uncertainty in it, and it can be very daunting. And it's not the best way to do things, but it's where we are now. And I think that there's a way to embrace that in ways that can really allow films to succeed, where otherwise somebody saying no at an early stage would sort of suffocate its future. And here there's many different ways to get out into the world.
Well, thank you so much for that. And to use our remaining time well, Heather, I'm wondering, for anyone who would like to learn more about income equality, what do you suggest? I know there's just a lot of resources that, your team has made available.
Yeah, so I think the easiest thing is to go to YouTube and type in Robert Reich and income inequality, or Robert Reich and wealth inequality, or Robert Reich and billionaires. We have videos on should billionaires exist. Um, and the answer is sure, but we need to change the system so there are not so many of them and it's not so unequal. And so, yeah, I think what's the nice thing about what we've tried to do through both Inequality Media and Inequality Media Civic Action is make this topic digestible and to bring a lot of statistics to people that could be overwhelming, but we try to make them real and tangible and add a lot of bespoke motion graphics to our content so that people can take it in. So, we share things like the richest 1% in America have grown 34% in terms of the share of wealth they own, hitting 50 trillion. And at the same time as that is happening, the bottom 50% of households has declined in terms of the chunk of the wealth pie they own. So it has declined 26% adjusted for inflation, and that means they own 4.1 trillion. So the bottom 50% own 4.1 trillion, and the top 1% owns 50 trillion. I mean, it's this kind of stuff. And so this is the kind of statistics that is featured throughout our videos and on Robert Reich's social pages, as well as those of Inequality Media, Civic Action, and Inequality Media. So my advice is to search online, and you could also sign up for Robert Reich's Substack. His latest book is a memoir. It's called Coming Up Short, a memoir of my America, if people are in the mood to read a book. He talks about the history of income inequality and kind of how we got to where we are today through his eyes as a child, as a undergraduate, as a secretary of labor, as a parent. And so any resource related to Inequality Media and Robert Reich is going to be hitting on this topic for sure.
Heather, while we're on the topic, would you like to share the social media handles or the websites that you have that are associated both with the work you do with Robert and with the film?
Yep. So the film's website is thelastclassfilm.com. And from that, you can get to our Substack, which has over 60,000 people engaging with our content around the film. And then the social media handles are at RB Reich. Those are across Instagram, and he's Robert Reich on Facebook. And then at I Am Civic Action and at Inequality Media are the ones for the two nonprofits, and they're all interconnected and they're all listed in his bios. So if you go online, and we're on all the platforms. I mean, the team at Inequality Media and Inequality Media Civic Action are exceptional. So we put out our content on Substack Notes. We put it out on Meta and all over the place in terms of Facebook and Instagram. We're still on Mastodon. We're on Blue Sky. So it's pretty much everywhere.
I see. And Heather, at the beginning, when we introduced you, we mentioned your work with Coffee Clutch. Would you like to just take a moment and tell the audience what that's about as well?
Oh, yeah. So this is fun for multiple reasons. One, it was Elliot Kirschner here's idea. So he was at Saul's, this fabulous cafe deli here in Berkeley. And Bob and I were chatting about the news of the week. And he said, you should record this for Substack. Just try recording it. I think it's great. I think you all are talking about, the news of the week and your opinions and what's happening and how you're processing. It's, a similar, I would say, Elliot, version to what your vision was for the film. And so we put it on Substack, and it is a podcast. It's a weekly podcast that comes out every Saturday. It's called The Coffee Clutch. It's now on Substack and YouTube. So we've moved to YouTube as well. And it's Bob and I just discuss what's happening. How are you feeling? What's the news of the week? What is a story we haven't seen that we should be elevating? Or what's a story that's been wrongly characterized? What are the frameworks that we should be thinking of? How do you stay hopeful at a time of such grim reality? And so those are kind of the things we grapple with, but in a casual style of two friend colleagues, froligs, having coffee. And so it's called The Coffee Clutch, YouTube. It's also on all the places where you can get your pods. But thank you, Heather, for giving a shout out from pod to pod. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. And Elliot, for anyone listening who thinks income equality is a problem that needs to be solved, do you have any specific things you suggest that they do?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think that the problems that we're facing as a country, as a world, as a society, they're multifaceted, and people have different expertise in some, and are more, or they're more present in other people's lives than others. I think that the answer for all of it is really to be engaged and in building community. I think it's finding people to work with, to come together, to give your time to local causes, to national causes. And I think there's a sense that, it's, voting is important, obviously, and political campaigns are important. But I think what this film hopefully shows is education, whether it's formal education in the classroom or just education through life. It requires being engaged and seeking out people to learn from, seeking out activities to do, to be part of the community. And I would say that income inequality is a major issue, obviously, in this world, and specifically in the United States as well. And but the approach for that is really it's really about trying to elevate this as a concern for policymakers, and to find ways to do that through the democratic process. And And that is voting, but it's also organizing, it's protesting, it's all sorts of other things. And it's just engaging in the kind of dialogue that is essential to civil discourse. So I think it's a matter of really being engaged. I mean, hopefully people see the film and are inspired after seeing it to seek out other opportunities to be part of their community. And what's been really wonderful, and what I think what's helped propel some of the the engagement with the film at theaters, is that people are they're coming, they're buying tickets in ones and twos, but they're also coming with a group of people that is already interested in these issues, and then they watch the film and they use that as a way to bring themselves together and find new people who are in their communities who are concerned about similar things. So I guess it's it's whether, as I said, whether it's a classroom, whether it's a movie theater, whether it's the town square, just find ways to come together and engage in the hard work of democracy.
Well, thank you for that. Well, we don't have too much time left, but in the time that remains, Heather, is there anything you would like to add that I haven't already asked you about?
No, I just want to say thank you on behalf of Elliot and me and Professor Reich and the whole film team for having us on the Art of Film Funding. And also, I'm so excited to see Kusama Infinity, your film, Heather Lens, because I took my kiddo to see an exhibit of hers at SF MoMA a year ago, and I didn't realize you'd made that film. So I'm so excited to see that.
Well, thank you so much. That's very kind of you, and it's our pleasure to have you on the show. And Elliot, is there anything you would like to add that we haven't already discussed?
No, just to echo Heather's thanks. I mean, it's really honored to be able to talk about this film, but also to talk about film more generally. I mean, I love it. I love going to it. I love watching it. I love making it, and I think that the world needs film now more than ever. And we there's a lot of struggles on the business model and all of that, but I don't think any of that takes away from the essential human connection that film brings. And that's why I remain hopeful and confident that it will endure, because it is so, when people, it's hard getting people to see it or clicking on it or finding out how to fund it. But when people actually watch it, they're moved, whatever age or demographic or where they live. I mean, it is a moving experience to see a film, especially in a room with others. And so I remain hopeful that endures as a essential part of the human experience.
Well, yes, I agree with you. And yeah, especially these days with so many cuts to funding, especially for documentary. So I'm, glad you were able to make your film and share the message. And I just want to thank you both again so much for being here with us today, taking time out of your busy schedule to discuss the film and share your wisdom with us. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. And thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks, Heather.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Now, in its second edition, Carol Dean's popular book, The Art of Film Funding, has 12 new chapters to cover all areas of film financing and how to avoid expensive pitfalls. Learn how to start with an idea and end with a trailer, how to make an ask for money, create your story structure and your trailer, legal advice, fair use, successful crowdfunding, how to ask for music rights, and what insurance you can't shoot without. Available on Amazon under Carol Dean and at FromTheHeartProductions.com. I want to remind our listeners that David Rakelin is a brilliant and talented award-winning musician who scores films and can compose music for a trio or for a full orchestra. David is a very good friend to the independent filmmaker and comes highly recommended by From the Heart Productions. If you need music to help tell your story, please contact him at davidrakelin.com. That's David, RAIKLEN.com. And Carol and I want to thank you for tuning in to The Art of Film Funding. Please visit our website at FromTheHeartProductions.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter. Good luck with your films, everyone.